Okay, we're going to take the CJ4 from Vancouver to Seattle. We'll initialize our position. We'll go from Vancouver to Seattle. We're going to fly at 20,000 feet. I'm going to simulate ATC and have them give me a couple of things on the way. So I'll have them ask me to hold for spacing, and then I'll have them simulate that they've asked me to hit a altitude restriction, a custom altitude restriction, so I can show doing both of those with the autopilot. I'll leave the ATC voices on here at the beginning because we need them on to hear the ATIS. So ATIS frequency here, Vancouver is 124.6. I'll put 124.6 in COM 2. Okay, we have Yankee and runway 8 is in effect. So we will fly the Vancouver 1 departure out of runway 8 right. We're parked over on the southeast part of the runway. I will simulate a squawk. And real quick, I'm going to turn off the ATC voices until I need ATIS on the way in. Started the engine so we get the beacon on. So this departure for runway 8 will be cleared to climb via the SID and then radar vectors onto our route, and then we'll be flying the Jawbone into Seattle. We're a turbojet aircraft, so the Jawbone altitude restriction at 12,000 feet will be there. We'll do one turn and holding at Jawbone, and then they'll ask us to get down 3 miles early to Griffey at 6,000 feet, and so we'll put all that stuff in autopilot. So this departure for runway 8 is to climb heading 083, or as assigned by ATC, maintain 7,000, or as assigned, expect radar vectors to filed assigned route and clearance to flight planned altitude flight level within 5 minutes after departure. So we'll use the takeoff go around mode to set the altimeter, and then we'll use the pitch mode, which works in this autopilot. Hit our climb profile, and then I'll give myself clearance up out of 7,000 feet to 20,000 feet. And then shortly after that's when we'll have to do our descent for the holding and all that stuff. So that's how our departure is going to work. Got our nav lights on, got our logo lights on. I've configured my flight director to use the crossing needles because I like that a little bit better than the V. See, we don't have any V speeds here, so we'll go back into our perf page. Actually, we need to go into our departure page and make sure that we're taking off from runway 8 right on the Vancouver 1. So we'll execute that. And now if we go to our performance page, because we have a runway in there now, 8 right, and we put in all that other data a minute ago, we can now get our V speed. So we're going to take off with anti-ice off, flaps 15, set that now. And so that gives us these V speeds, so I'll click send, and then those will be sent over here. So now we have V1, V rotate, V2, and V tango, where we can raise our flaps. So we go to our legs page, you'll see we're taking off on runway 8 right, 400 feet, and then we'll have vectors. That's our discontinuity, and the next thing that's in there is C-tag. So we know that we'll be flying the jawbone. So go into our departure and arrivals in here, and we'll put in the jawbone from YVR. Execute that, and then we'll put in the approach. We'll go ahead and put it in now, what we expect, though often you wouldn't put it in until you got there. You got it from ATC. So we'll do RNAV 16 left Zulu. Griffey. So now we'll go double check our legs page. Vector discontinuity, YVR, jawbone digging, Alkia, another discontinuity because the SID does not directly connect to Griffey. So what we're going to say is that we'll go from digging direct to Griffey. So the way you do that is you go click on Griffey, which loads it into the scratch pad, and then you can place that in right where Alkia is. So you can see that's put in there now. And if we click execute, that will set that. So now we have our flight plan in. I'll use memory 1 is my navigation. So you see we're going to take off and head runway 8. There's our discontinuity to head to YVR. So along here we'll get vectors to YVR. And if we zoom out, there's our jawbone into Seattle. What I've stored in memory 2 is the radar weather page. And then we're on the ground right now, so that's why it kind of looks funny. And in memory 3 I have the terrain page. Okay, we'll throw on our taxi lights. Make sure our speed brake is in. Flaps are set. Check out where we are on the runway. So we would call for taxi IFR to Seattle, and they'll say you're cleared to taxi via taxiway Delta Hotel Lima, hold short of runway 31. And we would read that back, and we're taxiing with India because that was the ATIS that we got. So let's go ahead. It's going to be a left turn over here. So this is taxiway Delta. The main terminal's over there in the tower. little bit. There's Taxiway Hotel. Here's Lima. Switch over to tower frequency. Tell them we're approaching runway 31. Tell us we're cleared to cross 31. So we'll repeat our clearance. Check final. Okay. Tell them we're number 1 for departure at 08 right. IFR to Seattle. And I'll say you're clear for takeoff. Double check final again. Okay, so we're lined up. Hit the takeoff buttons. You'll see TO for takeoff, and you'll see that it's setting a 083 heading and pitching 10 degrees nose up. So that'll give us a nice initial autopilot setting for takeoff, which is to fly runway heading and climb. We're heading up to 7,000. Flaps are at 15. Seatbelt signs on. Clear for takeoff. The rest of our lights on. Pitot heat's on. Continuous ignition is on. And go ahead and throttle up. Okay. Once full power is set, you'll see takeoff is set right there in the thrust. V1 or rotate. Positive rate, gear up. It's 140 knots. Flaps up. Let's do autopilot and yaw damper. And we'll set the climb detent. Okay, we'll turn this off and we'll go to heading. And we're in pitch mode. So what I can do is use the vertical speed here and I can lower my pitch. So what I'm doing is looking for 240 knots, which is the climb profile for the CJ4. So if I lower the nose, we'll accelerate a little bit. And it tells us to contact departure, so switch over to departure, and we'll go into flight level change. Actually set this right exactly to 240. Okay, they say radar contact, and you're cleared right turn, heading 200 direct to YVR. So copy that. So start a right turn.
Altitude.
1,000 feet to go, so we'll get the power back so we don't overspeed. And we'll go ahead and set direct to YVR and execute. And we can go ahead and put in nav mode. Here you see the little banana, which says we're going to hit our target altitude right here. Got some icing. And they clear us up to flight level 200. 200, flight level change. Put this back in the climb detent. And we'll once again set this to 240 knots. Now you can see the banana showing how far it's going to take us to reach the target altitude of 200. Passing 10,000 feet. We'll go ahead and get our taxi lights and our landing lights off. I'll go ahead and turn off the seatbelt sign. Climb profile for the CJ4 is 240 knots until you hit Mach 0.64, and then climb at 0.64. Cruise is 300 knots, Mach 0.74. Keep our heading bug mostly aligned in case the autopilot does anything crazy. Hopefully we'll be out of this soup. We are in the thick of it, though. Look at that. Alright, so since we're a turbojet, we are going to have an altitude restriction of 12,000. Jawbone, so I'll just go ahead and put that in. And what they're going to ask us to do is do one turn in holding for spacing at jawbone. So let's go ahead and enter that holding in there now. Just so it's easy to see, I will zoom out so you can see jawbone right there. And you'll see it's already calculated our top of descent point. So we'll go index holding, and it says they want us to hold as published. So I'm going to pull up the chart for the jawbone, and holding is 130 inbound course right hand turns. It looks to me like this working title has a bug in the holding where they don't take mag variation into account. So what we'll do is we'll select jawbone, put it in the scratch pad, and then we can load it into here. So we're adding a hold, and 1,000 feet to go. So 130, we'll add 16 to that, so I'll say 146 right hand turns. We'll go ahead and use a minute. So all that looks good, so we'll hit execute, and it's calculating a direct entry. And if we go back to the legs page, you'll now see jawbone, and then hold at jawbone, and you can see the holding pattern. And we did break out. The other thing they want us to do is after digging, we'll be direct Griffey, and 3 miles prior to Griffey, they want us to already be down at 6,000 feet. So let's go ahead and program that in while we're there. We can turn off the anti-ice now. Should be able to. Make sure no icing starts to form. So the way we'll do that is we'll put Griffey into the scratch pad, and then we're going to do minus 3 miles, and we're going to enter it into the flight plan. If we click on Griffey, it means it puts it in right before it. So click on Griffey, and you label it Griffey 01. We could have named it if we wanted, but you can see it right there. There's now an extra little waypoint there. If we click execute, that will put it in, and then we'll just say our altitude restriction is 6,000. So 6,000 there, and we'll still be at 6,000 at Griffey. It's actually at or above, but we'll already be down at 6,000, and then those are the rest at the altitude restrictions. And we'll let the VNAV fly all that stuff for us. So I'm going to turn VNAV on now, and you'll see since I did that, this little dot picked up, so it's calculating what our flight path angle will be to get to hit our altitude restrictions on the way down. The first one being the 12,000 at jawbone. As we get a little closer to this, we'll get a little bit of a warning that the top of descent is coming up. And then we'll need to set our altitude below it because you can't descend without ATC clearance. So it will automatically start you down on the VNAV if you've already lowered your altitude bug. And if not, it won't. It won't go below what you set in your altitude bug. So when we get a little closer to that top of descent, we'll go ahead and put in 12,000. So we'll descend down to jawbone, we'll do our hold at 12,000, we'll exit the hold, and then we'll let VNAV take back over again, fly us down for the rest of the approach. So I'm trying to fly about 300 knots right now for our cruise. We weren't really in the climb long enough for me to point it out, but if you go back and watch the earlier part of the video, you should see it. There's a FADEC system here in the working title. So as you climb, your power setting automatically increases with altitude so that you're always getting the right thrust, which is a nice touch. So started off probably at something, I don't know, like 90%, 95%, but it probably climbed up to closer to 100% as we gained altitude. So, looks like we're about 9 miles from the top of descent. And the way you could look at that is you can go to your perf page and your VNAV setup. Here you'll see the target is 290.74. I'll slow down a little bit. There's this check pre-selector, so we need to get our altitude down. So I'll set this down to 12,000. clear that out. And for VNAV monitor, you'll see it'll tell us how far it is to our top of descent. Currently it's just about 2 miles before we start down. Here's the snowflake. That magenta snowflake shows where we are relative to the calculated flight path angle. So it's going to try and keep that centered. So it's kind of like a glide slope indicator for your entire VNAV profile. So we're a little bit below it now. As that comes down, then our rate of descent will line up with this calculated rate of descent. And that should be calculated to put us right at 12,000, right at jawbone. And you'll see that this altitude banana says we're going to 12,000. We'll show where we're predicted to get there, and we should get there right at jawbone, which is very nice. You can use this if you're trying to hit an altitude at a certain point. If you're just using vertical speed or anything like that, you can calculate whether you're going to make it down in time or not. So that's really handy. Okay, we're starting down, so okay, passing 18,000 feet. We'll go back to standard altimeter. Looks like it's 2992. I'm also going to turn the ATC voices back on and dial up ATIS at CTAC, so we'll hear it when we're in range. Oh, there it is. It's windy. So we've got India passing 15,000 feet. Looks like we're still going to hit our altitude right. I'm going to start to slow down, so I'm doing 230 for our holding pattern. Temperature and dew point the same, which means it should be completely foggy. So that's our VREF and our V approach. So I'll go ahead and send that. So we'll have those speeds on the PFD. Get into icing again. So let's get our systems on. So 1,000 above our holding altitude and our altitude restriction at jawbone. Pretty turbulent out. Watch the FMC here. We'll change from jawbone to hold at jawbone. Okay, now we're in the holding pattern. Let's turn magenta. Watch our speed so we don't get too slow now that we've leveled off. So I just reset my altimeter. Simulating the ATC gave me the updated altimeter setting. And you'll see it's still calculating our V path. So as we're flying away from the field, we're going further and further below our calculated V path to get to our next point, which is Griffey 01, our manually entered waypoint, is our next altitude restriction that it's calculating for. Now on the outbound leg of our holding pattern, see it's doing a very nice job flying that holding pattern. Once we start our inbound turn, I will click here to exit the hold, and then that will arm the hold exit. And then once we hit the waypoint again, it will automatically exit the hold and continue with the flight plan. And then I will roll down the altimeter and the altitude pre-select, and I'm just going to roll it all the way down, basically all the way down to field elevation, and let VNAV handle the rest of our altitudes for us. Okay, starting our inbound turn. It was a minute. I also probably should have hit the elapsed timer, and we would have seen the time there, so you can use that timer for holding or approaches or wherever you need it. So I've hit the exit, and it'll say exit armed, which means it's now set up, triggered, so it'll exit the hold. And then the VNAV should descend us down to hit our manually entered waypoint, which is 3 nautical miles prior to Griffey, on our inbound track. And we'll resume the 250 knots for turbojets landing south that the SID calls for. I mean the star calls for. And until we get to Griffey. So we're just watching for this to exit. See our snowflakes coming down? Okay, we've exited. Let's go ahead and set this altitude down to 0. If it doesn't pick up automatically, I'll just cycle VNav. Now, I think the holding causes that to get a little confused, so there we go. Then you can say altitude V is what's armed. We're on the vertical path. 6,000 feet is our next restriction. We're slightly above it, so we're descending a little bit faster to get back on target. Again, we can go to our perf page. So you can see currently we're about 94 feet, 100 feet above our vertical path, but it's descending a little bit faster than normal to get it. 3-degree glide path. And if we zoom out a little bit here, you'll see that banana is showing that we're going to hit our target 6,000 right there at the waypoint that we put in. So that is all working perfectly. Okay, 10,000 feet. Make sure we're slowing down to 250 knots. Use a touch of speed brake just to make sure we're below 250. Okay, we've exited the star and we are now on the approach. So I'll bring up the chart for the RNAV Z to 16 left. And our straight-in landing minimums are 842 feet. So let's go here into our refs menu. And we will roll this down to our approach. And barrow right there. Select that and then roll the wheel. And we want 842, so we'll set 850. So our minimums are set. Reset my altimeter. 2998. And we're still on target to hit our 6,000 feet at Griffey. Since we'll be leveling, we'll need to make sure and monitor our power so that we don't get too slow. Okay, there's our waypoint, right about 6,000 feet. That's nice. And you'll see it's calculated a new top of descent point, which will be to hit the 4,000 foot restriction at Helzer. Okay, Griffey to Helzer has a minimum altitude of 4,000 feet, so that's not going to be a problem. Inbound course is 164. Minimums, as I already said, is 842. This is really a authorization required approach, so we're just assuming that we have that authorization. You need both the equipment in the plane and the certification of the aircrew to be able to fly an RMP approach like this. Okay, so we hit that top of descent, and now it's got us descending on our VNAV profile to hit Helzer at 4,000. You can see the field out there. So they would tell us we're cleared for the approach. And then tower will give us our clearance to landing. Make sure our heading bug is centered up in case we need it. Double check the altimeter setting. See the 4,000, which is the restriction at Helzer, which is also confirmed right here at or above 4,000. When we get there, I'll probably use a little bit of speed brakes again. Actually, we'll just put out a little tiny bit of speed brakes right now, just to get us slowed below 200 so we can do flaps and gear. Just a touch more because we're already at idle. Okay, coming up on Helzer and coming up on 4,000. Carfo at 3,200. Okay, below 200 knots, gear down. Make sure our speed brakes are up. We'll do 15 degrees flaps. And we can go ahead and hit approach now. And you'll see we're already on the glide path, so very quickly picked up the VGP, which is our RNAV glide path. So it's kind of like an ILS now, and this is a little higher precision than just that regular VNAV was, RNAV was. And that also means that since we're on the glide path, that we can reset our altitude for our missed approach. So I'm going to set it to 5,000. Initial climb is to 2,000. On a heading 164, tracking to York, and then up to 5,000, and then hold at mil T.
Altitude.
Let's go ahead and put 5,000 in here. Okay, and I'll switch us over to tower. Tower will clear us to land on runway 16 left. Starting to get our AOA indexer here. So that's showing that we're approaching on-speed AOA, which is the green donut, and we're slightly fast. And that makes sense because here's our VREF and our V approach. We have LPV approach, showing that we have highest accuracy in the RNAV system, which is what you need to fly an RNAV approach like this. This has got LPV minimum. So at Douglas here, we should double check 1900 feet, and we should hear the outer marker. So I'll go full flaps. We will start to slow down towards our reference. And now that we have full flaps, since I have the AOA set to auto for this menu here, we also have an AOA indicator here, as well as the AOA indexer up here. 1900 feet and the outer marker. So that's all good. Getting our radar altimeter. 3 green. Flaps are full. Lights are on. Speed brakes in. So when we land, we will apply our speed brakes to slow down. And then manual braking. There's no reverse thrust on the CJ4. So I'm just slowly letting the speed decay down to our approach speed. So as we get closer to it, you'll see this indexer will start to show the green donut. Confirm we're cleared to land. Minimum. 500 feet. There's our minimums. Continue. Slow this down to approach speed. Getting a little wind shear there. Turn the autopilot off. Try to keep this guy in center line. It's a little windy. Okay, here's our approach speed coming in. And idle. Aiming to touchdown in the touchdown zone on the center line. Rudder for control, speed brakes out. It's quite a bit of wind, so it's taking a lot of rudder. Okay, and that is a flight in the CJ4. Get a little braking action in here. And we'll exit here to the left. Alright, speed brakes in. Flaps coming up. We'll get clear of the radio zone for the runway. And we can get our landing lights off, our strobe lights off. And contact ground to exit the parking. So that's pretty much it.